The moment I opened my bedroom door, I knew my life was over. Not because I saw them together, but because of how comfortable they looked. My wife wasn't startled. My brother didn't panic. They didn't jump apart. They didn't scramble for excuses. They were lying in my bed like it belonged to them, like I was the intruder, and that hurt more than the betrayal itself. I stood frozen. The grocery bags slipped from my hands. Milk spilled across the floor. Eggs cracked. None of it mattered. All I could see was my wife's face. Calm. Not ashamed. Not scared. Just tired. Like she'd been waiting for this moment. My brother slowly sat up. "Dan, don't," I said quietly. My voice sounded strange in my own ears. Low. Empty. My wife pulled the blanket up to her chest. But not to hide. More like a reflex. "I was going to tell you," she said. That sentence. The one cheaters always say. As if timing is the problem. Not the betrayal. My brother slid off the bed. "I never meant for it to happen like this." I laughed once. Short and sharp. "Like what?" I asked. "In my house." Silence. Thick and ugly. I looked at my wife. "How long?" She hesitated. And that hesitation told me everything. 6 months, she whispered. 6 months. Half a year of lies. Half a year of dinners. Of kisses. Of "I love you." All theater. I backed away slowly, because suddenly the room felt too small. Too tight. Too full of memories. Our wedding photo on the dresser. Vacation souvenirs. The blanket my mother had given us. Every corner screaming that this was my life. And they were tearing it apart inside it. "Why?" I finally asked. My wife looked down. "We grew apart. That was it. No screaming. No anger. Just the laziest excuse in the world." "You grew into my brother?" I said bitterly. She flinched. My brother spoke. "Dan, it wasn't planned. You're my blood," I snapped. "You held my kids when they were born. You stood beside me at my father's funeral. And you slept with my wife." He couldn't look at me. I left. I didn't punch him. Didn't scream. Didn't throw anything. I just walked out of my own house and sat in my truck shaking. Because when betrayal comes from strangers, it hurts. But when it comes from the two people who know you best, it destroys your sense of reality. That night, my wife texted, "We need to talk." I didn't respond. My brother called. I didn't answer. I drove until I didn't recognize the roads anymore. And I thought that was the worst pain of my life. I was wrong. Because the affair was only the surface. What I uncovered in the following weeks showed me that my marriage and my family had been rotting from the inside for years. And the truth would cost me far more than a wife. It would cost me everything I thought I knew about loyalty. I didn't go back home that night. I booked a cheap motel 15 miles away and sat on the edge of a bed that smelled like bleach and bad decisions. I stared at the wall for hours, not crying, not yelling, just replaying the scene over and over. The calm on her face, the lack of fear in his. That's what haunted me. Not guilt, not panic, comfort, like they'd already accepted this was inevitable. At 2:17 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was my wife. "Please come home. We need to handle this like adults. Handle this like it was a scheduling conflict. Not betrayal. Not family destruction." I didn't answer. Instead, I opened our shared banking app. I don't know why. Maybe instinct. Maybe I needed something solid to focus on. That's when my stomach dropped. There were transfers I didn't recognize. Small at first. $3,000 here. $5,000 there. Over the last 6 months. 6 months. The same timeline she gave me for the affair. I scrolled further. There were larger withdrawals 2 weeks ago. And one pending transaction for nearly $40,000. My heart started racing. I clicked the recipient. The account name hit me like a second punch. M. Carter Holdings. Carter. My brother's last name. I felt the blood drain from my face. They weren't just sleeping together. They were moving money. I drove back to the house before sunrise. I didn't knock. I walked in. They were in the kitchen. Together. like this was already normal. My wife looked up first. "You're back." No relief. No tears. Just tension. My brother stood slowly. "We can explain." I held up my phone. "Explain this." I showed them the transfers. My brother's face changed instantly. My wife didn't. That scared me more. "It was an investment," she said calmly. "With my money?" I asked. "With our money," she corrected. "No," I said slowly. "With the money I inherited from Mom. That inheritance wasn't joint. It was mine. The last thing my mother left me before she died. She had specifically asked that I keep it safe. For retirement. For security. For the kids. My wife knew that. It was just sitting there," she said. "It was security," I snapped. "It was for our future." She crossed her arms. "I wanted growth, not stagnation." I stared at her. "You gave my inheritance to my brother?" "It's not like that." "It's exactly like that." My brother stepped in. "It's a property flip," he said. "High return." I looked at him. "You've never flipped anything in your life." He hesitated. And in that hesitation, I saw something else. Fear. "What aren't you telling me?" I asked quietly. Silence. My wife looked at him. He looked at her. That silent exchange told me more than words ever could. They weren't just in love. They were in something together. Something risky. "Is the money gone?" I asked. "No," my brother said quickly. "It's tied up." "Tied up how?" He swallowed. "In escrow." "For what?" Another silence. My chest tightened. "For what?" My wife finally answered. "For the down payment." "On what?" She hesitated. "Our place." The words echoed. Our place. Not the house I was standing in. Not the home we built. Another house. For them. Funded by my mother's inheritance. I felt something inside me go quiet. Dangerously quiet. "How long were you planning to leave?" I asked. My wife didn't answer. My brother did. "We didn't want it to be messy." I laughed. "Messy?" "You were going to move into a house bought with my money." Silence. "Where?" I asked. My wife shook her head. "It doesn't matter." "It matters to me." She exhaled. "Arizona." Arizona. Different state. Different life. Different start. Without me. "Were you going to tell me?" I asked. She looked away. "Eventually." I nodded slowly. "After what?" "After the money cleared?" My brother shifted uncomfortably. "You're making this worse than it is." I looked at him. "Worse?" "You're sleeping with my wife. You're using my inheritance. You're planning to leave the state. How exactly could this be worse?" And that's when he said it. "It's not just the money." The room went silent. My heart began pounding again. "What do you mean?" He looked at my wife. She closed her eyes. And in that moment I knew. There was something else. Something bigger. "What?" I demanded. My brother swallowed hard. "The house is in your name." I blinked. "What?" "The new one," he said quietly. "It's in your name." My brain struggled to catch up. "Why?" "Because," my wife whispered, "your credit is better." The world tilted. "You used my credit." "It was temporary," she said quickly. "Just until we refinanced." I stared at her. "You were going to default." "No." "Yes," I said, the truth crashing into place. "You were going to move to Arizona. Let the loan sit. Let it collapse. And leave it tied to me." My brother's silence confirmed it. They had planned to use my financial stability as a stepping stone. And once they were settled, they would let the debt rot under my name. I felt physically sick. Not just betrayed. Exploited. Like a tool. Like a ladder they were climbing. "You're my brother," I said quietly. He couldn't look at me. "You're supposed to protect family." He muttered something about love. I cut him off. "This isn't love. This is greed." My wife's voice cracked for the first time. "It wasn't supposed to hurt you like this." I looked at her. "How exactly did you imagine it would feel?" She didn't answer. Because there was no version of this that wasn't destruction. I walked out again. But this time I wasn't just heartbroken. I was calculating, because this wasn't just emotional damage. This was financial warfare. That afternoon I called a lawyer, then another, then a forensic accountant. And what they uncovered made the situation even darker. The Arizona property wasn't the only thing in my name. There were credit inquiries, applications, draft contracts, and something else. Something that made the lawyer go very quiet. "Mr. Carter," he said slowly, "did you authorize a life insurance policy update?" My heart stopped. "What?" "There's a new beneficiary." Silence. "Who?" I whispered. He cleared his throat. "Your brother." The air left my lungs. My brother. Beneficiary. On a $1 million policy. Updated 3 months ago. Without my knowledge. And suddenly, the betrayal didn't feel like heartbreak anymore. Felt dangerous. When the lawyer said my brother's name, I thought I had misheard. "Can you repeat that?" I asked quietly. He cleared his throat. "The beneficiary on your life insurance policy is now Mark Carter. Your brother." My chest tightened so hard it felt like someone had wrapped a rope around my lungs. "That policy has always been for my wife and kids," I said. "Yes," the lawyer replied. "It was changed 3 months ago. Digitally." 3 months. That lined up perfectly with the start of the affair. "You're saying my wife changed it?" "Either her," he said carefully, "or someone with full access to your personal information." Silence stretched between us. "And was the policy increased?" I asked. Another pause. "Yes," he said. "Significantly." My stomach dropped. "How much?" "From $200,000 to $1.2 million. The room spun. They hadn't just betrayed me. They had planned around my death. I hung up and sat in my truck for a long time. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Affairs hurt. Financial betrayal hurts. But when someone quietly prepares to profit from your death, that hits a different level of fear. I replayed every argument. Every time she'd pushed me to drive when tired. Every time she'd insisted I take late-night jobs. Every time she'd said, "Be careful," in a tone that now felt strange. Had I been paranoid before? Or blind? I drove back to the house. Not angry. Focused. They were in the living room, talking quietly. When they saw me, my brother stood up fast. "Dan." I held up my hand. "Don't," I said calmly. My voice didn't even sound like mine anymore. I looked straight at my wife. "Why is my life insurance in Mark's name?" Her face drained instantly. My brother froze. "That's not what it looks like," she whispered. "Then explain it," I said softly. She opened her mouth, closed it, looked at my brother, and suddenly I knew. This wasn't just her idea. "You were planning something," I said. "No," she cried. "We would never." "Then why increase it?" I snapped. Silence. My brother finally spoke. "It was just security," he said weakly. "Security for what?" I asked. "For the investment," he said. I stared at him. "Dead men don't invest," I said quietly. The words hung in the air. My wife started crying harder. "You're twisting everything." "No," I said calmly. "I'm finally seeing it clearly. You were going to leave," I continued, "with my money, using my credit, living in another state, and collecting if something happened to me." My brother's face hardened. "That's not fair." "Fair?" I laughed softly. "You're sleeping with my wife and signing paperwork on my death." Then something slipped. Just one sentence. One mistake. "We never said anything would happen to you," my brother snapped. "Never said." I tilted my head. "You mean you talked about it?" Silence. Thick. Deadly. My wife covered her mouth. Mark stared at the floor, and I felt the final puzzle piece lock into place. "You planned this," I whispered. "No," she cried. "We talked about worst-case scenarios. People don't change beneficiaries for worst-case scenarios," I said. "You change them when you expect something." I stepped back slowly, because suddenly I didn't feel safe in my own house. I didn't know if they would hurt me. I didn't know how far this plan went. But I knew one thing. They had crossed from betrayal into something criminal. "I'm leaving," I said. "You can't just walk away," my wife cried. "Watch me." I grabbed a bag, keys, wallet, phone, and before I walked out, I turned back. "If anything happens to me," I said quietly, "you'll be the first people they look at." The fear in their eyes told me that landed. That night, I slept with my phone in my hand and my truck parked under a streetlight. The next morning, I filed a police report, not accusing, documenting the transfers, the policy change, the identity use, everything. The officer's expression grew darker with every detail. "This isn't just a domestic issue," he said finally. "This is fraud, and potentially conspiracy." My heart pounded. "So what do I do?" "Stay away from them," he said. "And don't confront them again." But it was already too late for that. Because while I was at the police station, my phone buzzed. A message from my brother. "We need to talk. This is getting out of control." Another from my wife. "Please come home. We can fix this." Fix. The word made my skin crawl. What they didn't know was that the investigation had already started. And what the police would uncover next was even darker than the affair. 2 days after I filed the report, a detective called me. His name was Harris. His voice was calm, but serious. "Mr. Carter," he said, "we've started reviewing the financial trail." My stomach tightened. "And there are more accounts than you knew about." I closed my eyes. "How many?" "At least 6, he said. "Shell accounts, opened using your identity." 6. Not 2. Not 3. 6. "They've been moving money through them for over a year," he continued. "Not just your inheritance." My chest felt heavy. "What else?" "Your business income," he said quietly. I nearly dropped the phone. "My contracting company?" "Yes," he said. Payments were being redirected. I suddenly understood why some months felt tighter than others. Why projects that should have been profitable barely covered expenses. They weren't just planning to leave. They were draining me slowly, carefully, quietly. That night, I met Detective Harris at the station. He showed me printed bank records spread across a conference table. It looked like a spider web. Money in, money out, property payments, loan payments, insurance adjustments, credit inquiries, all of it connecting back to my wife and brother. But something else caught my eye. Another name kept appearing. Evelyn Ross. "Who is that?" I asked. Harris exhaled. "We believe she helped set up some of the accounts." "Do I know her?" He nodded slowly. "She works at your wife's real estate office." My heart sank. Coworker. Someone Laura trusted. Someone who probably knew all our personal details. "So it wasn't just them," I whispered. "No," Harris said. "It looks like a small operation." Operation. The word made everything feel colder. More organized. More dangerous. "Was Richard involved?" I asked. Harris nodded. "Your brother appears to be the financial middleman," he said. "But we suspect someone else is pulling strings." Another twist. "There's someone above them?" "We think so," he said. "And we're still digging." Over the next week, my life became paperwork and paranoia. I changed passwords, closed accounts, put fraud alerts on my credit, moved into a small apartment, stopped answering my wife's calls, stopped reading my brother's texts. But they didn't stop trying. Voicemails, apologies, anger, threats, then apologies again. The emotional whiplash was exhausting. One night my wife showed up at my apartment unannounced. I opened the door and froze. Her eyes were swollen. She looked smaller, broken. "I know you hate me," she whispered. "I don't hate you," I said quietly. "I don't recognize you." She started crying. "They're saying I could go to jail." I stared at her. "They?" "The police," she said. "They talked to Evelyn." My heart thudded. "What did she say?" "She said it was my idea," Laura sobbed. "She said I planned everything." I believed it, not because Laura was innocent, but because when things fall apart, people save themselves. "What's the truth?" I asked. Laura wiped her face. I made bad choices, she whispered. But Mark pushed the money stuff. He said it was temporary. And the insurance? I asked. She hesitated. That was Evelyn, she said. She said it would protect the investment. I stared at her. You didn't question it? She shook her head. I trusted them. That word again. Trusted. Why didn't you stop? I asked softly. She cried harder. I felt trapped, she said. Every time I hesitated. Mark said we were too deep to turn back. I sighed. That's what criminals always say. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. Mark is scared, she whispered. Of what? He thinks someone's watching him. My stomach tightened. He said a man followed him from the bank yesterday. Detective Harris's words echoed in my mind. Someone else pulling strings. That night, Harris called me again. We identified the person funding some of the shell accounts, he said. Who? A man named Victor Hale. The name meant nothing to me. He has a history of white-collar crime, Harris continued, and connections to property scams. So Mark and Laura were just part of something bigger? Yes, he said. And Victor tends to disappear when investigations close in. My chest tightened. Disappear how? New identities, Harris said. New states. Sometimes new countries. The same pattern. Again. The betrayal was now bigger than my family. It was a criminal network. And I had been the cash flow. 2 days later, something terrifying happened. I was leaving work when I noticed a black SUV parked across the street. It had been there in the morning. Now again. I got into my truck. The SUV pulled out slowly. Followed me. My pulse raced. I made a random turn. So did it. Another turn. Still there. My stomach dropped. Someone was watching me. Not Laura. Not Mark. Someone else. I drove straight to the police station. The SUV sped away. Harris listened quietly. This confirms it, he said. Confirms what? Victor Hale knows we're investigating. My throat tightened. And when he feels threatened, people around him tend to have accidents. The word hung heavy. Accidents. You're in danger, Harris said calmly. So is your brother. So is your wife. I stared at him. They might hurt them? They might, he said. Or use them. For the first time, I felt something shift. Not just betrayal. Responsibility. Because no matter what Laura and Mark had done, I didn't want them dead. I didn't want this to end in blood. That night, my brother finally called. I almost didn't answer. But I did. Dan, he whispered urgently. We're in trouble. What kind of trouble? I asked. Victor knows the cops are involved, he said. He wants us to meet. My heart pounded. Where? At the old warehouse near the river. My stomach dropped. That wasn't a safe place. That sounds like a setup, I said. He says it's to fix things, Mark whispered. I closed my eyes. Mark, I said slowly. You're being used. There was silence. He says if we don't come, Mark whispered. He'll make this go away permanently. Go away. I knew what that meant. They want to meet tonight, Mark said. Laura's already on her way. My blood ran cold. Mark, listen to me, I said urgently. Don't go. She thinks if we cooperate, it'll stop. It won't, I said. I could hear his breathing shaking. Then what do we do? I thought of Harris. Of the investigation, of the black SUV, of men who disappear. You come with me to the police, I said firmly. Silence. He won't let us, Mark whispered, and then he hung up. I immediately called Harris. They're meeting Victor tonight, I said. Where? I told him. His voice sharpened. Stay where you are. What about them? We're moving now, he said. Sirens wailed faintly in the background. My heart raced. That night would decide everything. Not just the case. Not just the money. But whether my family survived the consequences of their betrayal. I didn't wait. The moment I hung up with Detective Harris, I grabbed my keys and drove toward the river. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the steering wheel. I knew it was dangerous. I knew the police told me to stay put. But Laura and Mark were walking straight into a trap. And no matter what they had done to me, couldn't let them die for it. The warehouse sat near the edge of town. Abandoned. Windows broken. Graffiti across rusted metal doors. The kind of place nothing good happens. I parked far back and approached quietly. Inside, voices echoed. I recognized Mark's immediately. "Victor, we did what you asked," he said nervously. Another voice answered. "Smooth. Cold. That remains to be seen." I peeked around a stack of crates. Laura stood beside Mark. Victor Hale leaned against a table. Tall. Well-dressed. Too calm for a man in a warehouse. Two other men stood behind him. Not smiling. "You've caused a lot of attention," Victor said casually. Mark swallowed. "We didn't mean to." Laura stepped forward. "You said you'd fix it." Victor smiled faintly. "I said I'd handle it." Fear flashed in her eyes. "That's not the same thing." Victor sighed. "You two were useful," he said. "But you're also liabilities now." My stomach dropped. "What does that mean?" Mark whispered. "It means," Victor said calmly, "this story ends tonight." Laura gasped. Mark stumbled backward. "You can't," Laura cried. "We did everything." "Yes," Victor said. "And now you know too much." One of the men behind Victor stepped forward. That's when I knew. This wasn't about money. It was about erasing problems. Before I could think, sirens exploded outside. Red and blue lights flashed through the broken windows. Police flooded the area. "Hands up! Now!" Chaos erupted. Victor spun toward the door. But officers were already there. His men tried to run. They didn't get far. Within seconds, everyone was on the ground. Handcuffed, yelling, crying. Victor stared at the officers in disbelief. "You don't know who you're dealing with," he snapped. The detective stepped forward. "We know exactly who you are." Laura collapsed in tears. Mark sat shaking. I stepped into the light. Their eyes locked on me. "Dan," Laura whispered. Relief and shame crashed over her face. Harris approached me quietly. "You did the right thing calling us," he said. I nodded, barely able to speak. Victor was arrested that night. So were his associates. The evidence was overwhelming. Shell companies, stolen identities, money laundering, property fraud across multiple states. It was bigger than anyone realized. National headlines followed. Laura and Mark were charged too, not for violent crimes, but for fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. They didn't go to prison for decades, but they lost everything else. Reputations, savings, careers, trust. Sometimes that's the real punishment. The courts restored most of my assets. The house stayed mine. My business recovered slowly. My credit took time to repair, but it healed, just like I did. Slowly, painfully, but stronger. Laura and I divorced, not with screaming, with exhaustion. Two people who had burned everything down. She apologized more times than I can count. I forgave her eventually, not because she deserved it, because I deserved peace. Mark and I haven't spoken since. Blood doesn't excuse betrayal. Some bridges are meant to stay burned. Here's what I learned. The deepest betrayals don't always start with hate. They start with silence, with secrets, with small compromises that grow into disasters. People don't suddenly destroy lives. They do it one excuse at a time. I lost a wife. I lost a brother. But I saved my life before their choices finished destroying it.